Ever feel like you're standing outside the glittering gates of the creative industry? You know, watching everyone else walking in and wondering, how do I even get through those doors? Well, join the club, literally. I am Michelle, and this is the Uninvited Podcast. Today's guest is part of the new generation reshaping fashion from the inside out, designing with purpose, challenging the system, and redefining what luxury means today. Blending sustainability with artistry, their creation have been worn by the likes of Sarah Jessica Parker, Lady Gaga, and Zendaya. And last year, they received the Elizabeth II Award for British Design. Let's get past the velvet rope with Patrick McDowell. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me in conversation here at the Roses of Elagabalus. I cannot believe that the first time I met you, you were about to graduate from Central St. Martin's. And 8 years later, here we are, and so much has happened.
I know, it's been a crazy ride.
A very exciting ride. What do you recall of the time where you were about to graduate? And by the way, at the time I was working, I studied at London College of Fashion, and I got the chance to meet you because I was working on a unit and we had to focus on sustainability. Mm-hmm. And so you were so kind and available, and you gave me a bit of your time, and we discussed about it. And I believe that you have evolved so much, but also the concept of sustainability has changed a lot, and there is more awareness. What do you recall of that time?
I mean, now I think I look back on it quite fondly because, when you graduate and you start a business, you realize it's quite a beautiful space that you occupy, especially at St. Martin's. You kind of have this freedom to be creative for creativity's sake, which is quite beautiful. I remember being very apprehensive and very excited. I was thrilled to be creating a collection, and I felt like I'd really gotten into my stride actually by that year, and I'd left Burberry and gone back to study, and it was felt like things were kind of beginning to happen, which I liked, and it was nice to have a longer project to get my teeth stuck into, and of course it was all made from these old materials from Burberry, which was super exciting, and from a practical point of view, gave me the most incredible materials to make a collection from, which also had a sustainable message too.
And when you created your graduate collection, creating and launching your own brand, you already had the idea that you wanted the brand to be entirely sustainable, right?
I think, I was the first thing I ever made was a bag out of a pair of jeans when I was 13 years old. And, I continued to make things out of old things. And that story's always been part of what I've done. And it was from necessity, not for sustainability at that point. And I think later at St. Martin's, I realized that all these things I've been doing and these ways I've been working actually were called sustainability. And that was something that was to be proud of, I guess. And so then when I was doing my graduate collection, it kind of felt natural that I would work with a previous employer to use up things that they couldn't use and give those things a new life, which was super exciting. And like I said, it was a practical thing as well, right? I had very little money back then, and it enabled me to create these beautiful clothes with fabrics that are from some of the best mills in the world. And I think as I was graduating in 2018, that sustainability was kind of having a moment. People were talking about it, but it definitely had a reputation for being a bit bland. And I think the collection I showed was quite glamorous and quite modern and a lot cooler than the stuff I do now. It really kind of struck a chord with people.
Do you remember how many items you created for your graduate collection?
Yeah, it was 6 looks, which is not many, really, and I'd been working at Burberry where we were creating many looks kind of every week. Going back, I had a scholarship from the British Fashion Council, which was incredible, which allowed me to only have one part-time job instead of three, which I'd had in the past. And I'd come from Burberry where we've been making, many collections throughout the year and many looks every week. And so suddenly I had this whole year to create 6, and that just seemed, like such a joy because it felt like a lot of time, and you can really develop things when you have that time. Of course, it's much different because you're also making them and developing the pieces yourself, right? You don't have these big teams, but yeah, it kind of goes back to my earlier point that it's just very special that you can be in this space and spend so long to create a relatively small collection, and for it to be purely for the sake of creating it.
And as you progress with your brand, you now, I believe that, how many looks we have for your collection now, for your latest collection now?
25.
Okay, from 6, quite a lot. Was it a struggle for you to keep the sustainable element? Perhaps when you graduated, you had the idea, okay, I want to have a sustainable brand, but then while you were doing that, you realize, okay, perhaps if I want to keep it sustainable, I encounter a few challenges. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure it is a challenge, and it's something I've become known for, right? That is sustainable and circular practices. So it's really built into how we work. I will say, as we grow, it is challenging to keep those principles and find ways to grow in a way that makes sense. But it's a great challenge to have, and we kind of relish it. And, compared to many fashion brands, we still are very small, and intentionally so, because we want the pieces to feel very special and very limited. And we want our clients to know that they're one of a handful of people that have the piece that they own, even with our new ready to wear. And so for me, it all just plays into building a luxury brand of today or tomorrow.
I think it's the idea of what luxury is constantly evolving, and I believe that having something that it's limited or made to order and it's really one of a kind.
Yeah, it's such a special story and process to be involved with, and especially with bespoke pieces, which is how I started. That's an incredibly beautiful journey to go on with a client, and to develop a piece with them is such a joy and my favorite part of the job.
And another thing that I find so fascinating is the fact that when you graduated from Central St. Martin, you got offered a role at Burberry, if I am not mistaken, but you decide to focus and launch your brand instead. Is it true?
It's true. I it was really unexpected when I graduated. Things were going much better than I imagined. We dressed Rita Ora, who had an album out at the time, and we were on the September cover of British Elle. And these things kept happening very quickly after graduating, like all this press coverage and stuff. And I kind of felt if I didn't ride that wave at the time, it wouldn't come again. So I took a chance. And like I said, I'd been very entrepreneurial as a kid, and, I was selling these bags I made from 13 years old, and I was selling cards I made from 7 years old. And it's always been part of me too, to want to build a business and sell things, right? So yeah, I took a chance. And
I think it was a huge risk somehow. And I'm like, I am so glad that you took it.
I guess it was a perfect storm of many things came together. I was living with my boyfriend at the time. You know, like I said, all these kind of press things kept happening, and I'd secured some kind of like part-time teaching roles and things, and I thought, you know, why not? And I think the amazing thing is when you really come from nothing. You know, my family has no money. I'm not, you know, not from anybody that works in fashion. I have no connections in fashion as a family, and I think when you just have that kind of, you know, when you really come from nothing, you're not afraid to do something because you're not losing anything. You know, you're free in a way. And it's a freedom that many other students at St. Martin's sadly don't have because they're from wealthier backgrounds. There's a lot more to lose, you know, and there was nothing for me to lose. So I was very happy to try, I guess. And there wouldn't have been any difference, you know, whether I did or didn't do the Burberry job to the current reality of how I was living at the time. So I took a chance. But, you know, as you've said, actually, thinking about it, I guess it was quite brave.
I think we already got past the velvet rope, but I am so curious to know, to you, what's your velvet rope moment where you felt like things have really shifted and you actually moved from the outside to the inside of the industry?
It would be when we received the Queen Elizabeth II award in April 2025. That was, you know, big turning point where kind of suddenly the whole industry was looking at us, and you have the recognition and the seal of approval from British Fashion Council and the royal family, which is incredible. And, you know, especially for a brand like ours that creates, you know, very beautiful feminine clothes for a specific type of woman, that those seals of approval are very important. And it really kind of like positioned us in a place that allowed us to be part of a wider conversation in fashion and move forward to grow as a brand. And you know, that was incredible, and it really made a huge difference. It was like night and day, considering a few months earlier to that, business had been so bad that I actually was considering kind of closing the business down and was not really sure how to navigate moving forward, because at that time, you know, in like January 2025, lots of fashion businesses were really struggling, and it was a really difficult time for lots of brands, and so the award really came at the right time.
You received the award from the Princess of Wales. I think she will look so good in so many looks of your latest collection, The Gaze, which congratulations, by the way. It's so chic, and I think it's so much needed in fashion right now.
Well, you look very chic wearing it.
How can I forget? Yeah, I am wearing Patrick McDowell, by the way. That's the first thing that I should have said. Yeah, she will look great. Recently, Zendaya was wearing one of your items, I think last week. And before that, you create made-to-order outfit for Sarah Jessica Parker, right? That was also, I think, a good turning point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, making something for Sarah Jessica Parker is a great moment in any designer's career, I think. And it's so great, you know, when the piece really fits the person and they look great. And, you know, I think for anyone over 30, that, you know, Sex and the City and just like that hold such cultural relevance for us, especially as a gay person. And so it was a real dream to make that for Sarah Jessica, and she looked amazing in it. And it was also, you know, real kudos to Molly and Danny, the costume designers from the show, because they really worked with me to create something that worked really perfectly for that scene as well. And that's the real skill of a great costume designer, right? Is to make the actress look amazing, but also in the context of the scene they're in. And you know, she was wearing it at a bridal show where all the pieces on the runway are white, and she's there in this floral ensemble and looked amazing. So
Yeah, it's such a great look. Where would you say your brand is the strongest when it comes to sustainability, and where do you think, which areas will you still like to improve?
we really try our best, and I've always tried to have kind of holistic view of it. So whether it's the fact that the team at the studio doesn't work late ever, or whether it's the materials we use, or the research we do into new fabrics, or the fact that we track all of our carbon emissions, we really try and take a holistic view of it to kind of come at it from every angle, and we can improve in all of those angles. And happily, as I've developed the brand, sustainability has developed too, and things that we thought were sustainable when I started now we think aren't so great. And that's an amazing journey to be on, right? Because you keep evolving and learning and ultimately keep growing, which is what you want. So yeah, for sure we can do better, but we do try very hard, and it's exciting to see the developments in the industry.
Moving to the second section of the podcast, the gate crash. I would love to know, what's your gate crash moment when you challenge a gatekeeper to move forward with your career, literally or metaphorically?
Yes, I think there's been many moments like that. I think probably the one that comes to mind is, as a young 17-year-old about to go to Sandra St. Martin's. I was applying for the university, right? It was a dream to go there, and I hadn't really come up with a plan B, even though people kept telling me to, right? It was just that I was going to go to St. Martin's, and I was meant to have a foundation course to do that. So I thought, I'll go and do the foundation course at St. Martin's, and then I will go and do the degree. And by some fluke, I ended up also getting an interview for the degree at the same time as I was interviewing for the foundation. And I found out the night before the degree interview that I was declined from the foundation course. So of course I thought, there's no way they'll give someone a place on the degree if they can't even let them into the foundation, right? The foundation is the building blocks for the degree. So if you're not good enough for that, there's no way you're good enough for womenswear at St. Martin's, which is the most kind of famous course that they do. So off I go, very kind of downtrodden about it, from Liverpool down to London for this interview for the degree. And I remember being there and kind of having a conversation with the foundation team at the same time, because I kind of demanded to speak to them to say, how is it possible that you can be interviewed for this degree if I'm not good enough for the foundation, right? Surely I should be at that standard if I've been here with this interview. And they were like, no, it's done, we're full, maybe try somewhere else, like come back another time. And I'd really spent my whole life from 13 to 18 doing everything I could to get there, and I was very sad about that, and anyway, somehow I don't know what happened, but 2 months later, on the very last day that they could let you know if you were or weren't in the degree, I was told I had a place. So I don't know. Yeah,
it's incredible.
It is incredible. I mean, all of it is incredible. I come from a very working class part of Liverpool, and people from there don't work in fashion. They definitely don't go to St. Martin's. They don't work in luxury, and none of this should have happened, really. So it's all, I'm particularly grateful and just feel very lucky that I got to do this, because it was my dream, right? Since I was 6, I said I wanted to be a fashion designer. It's what I've always wanted to do. So it's really special for me that this is what I do.
Well, congratulations. And
Thank you.
Also I have to say, I am sorry that you felt this way, because I believe that there are probably the most talented people in the world, the most creatives. Some of the creatives, not all of them have been born in New York, London, or a big city where, kind of like you feel like everything is possible and available. Yes. So I'm sure you're not the only one, but also I don't think that no one should feel that way just because, they were born in a working class family, or like in a place where you don't see luxury. And sometimes especially because of that, your drive is so strong, and that's why you
Yes.
succeed.
Yeah, there's, I think it, for some people, it really gives you a really strong fire inside you that makes you determined to do well and escape where you're from and become this thing. And you use the thing, right? For me, fashion was the thing. You used it as a vehicle of escape. So yeah, I'm also grateful to it for that.
Gate crashing St. Russell Martin. Done.
Yeah.
Probably you have been asked so many times, but I felt like I had to at least mention. How was your time at Central St. Martin's? Because, I mean, it's recognized as one of the best fashion schools. And probably it must have been, I mean, I'm talking about, I studied in a fashion school as well. And I remember, growing up in a place where there was no fashion, there was no luxury. And then all of a sudden you are in a place where you meet people that speak the same language, but at the same time, I felt like sometimes you might not enjoy your studies so much because of the external pressure. And how was it for you?
When I first started, it was really difficult because you're meant to do a foundation course, right? And I hadn't done one. So from a design perspective, I really struggled because I hadn't done this kind of key year to begin the degree. So now I'm a huge advocate for those courses, and I think everyone should do them because how amazing that you get to spend a year just exploring your own creativity. It's really a gift. So huge advocate for them. But aside from that, I'd moved from the suburbs to London. I sounded very Liverpudlian, which, it really kind of like sets you aside as different, and also looked very different. I was very visibly gay. I used to have lots of like blonde curly hair and very feminine features. Now I look quite, it's probably the most mask I've ever looked, but
we evolve personally as well.
We evolve, we age. And so, yeah, I found it very difficult. It was very hard at the beginning, and I was definitely felt like I was kind of sinking. And at some point, I think it was kind of like in the April of that first year, I was thinking, okay, I can't do this. Like I've got to quit. Which is interesting. It's not really my kind of thing, but I was very, I think looking back now, I can see that I was kind of had a bit of depression and really bad anxiety, and I just think it became quite crippling. And creativity is really difficult to foster when you're in that kind of mental state, and also when financially things are really, really tight. It's really difficult to express your creativity when you kind of don't have enough money to eat. It's really occasionally you can kind of like push through it and do amazing things, and I did do that, and I'm very grateful that happened. But definitely at some point I was just very finding it really tough, and then suddenly in the second year I kind of really fell into it and found my feet and had 3 part-time jobs at the same time, and the work became really good and interesting, and I really kind of understood it. And so I'm really grateful that I stuck with it and went through that very difficult year to then then kind of find my voice a bit and really get into it. And then I started wearing the most incredible outfits, and I was kind of like using myself as a mannequin every day. And I remember one of the jobs I had was at a bar in Soho, and I would get paid in cash, and on a Sunday I would get like it's crazy, I think I got like £30 for like 3 days work, and I would take the £30 to trade in Islington, which at the time had really amazing things, like just all these kind of crazy stuff, and I would just spend it all on things in this charity shop, right? And then I would wear them all for the week afterwards in St. Martin's, and then it was really amazing. So I was like using my own body as a canvas, I guess, to explore fashion and different ways of working. And sometimes it didn't really work, but sometimes it looked great.
I think it's part of the process to find out what works and what doesn't. Going back to the difficult year, where did you find the strength to carry on?
I think I've always found a bit of strength in like exercise, like running. I used to run a lot. It's also free, which was good at the time. Um, I remember like having a good conversation with my mom about it, and she was kind of very, she was very supportive in the sense that she was like, if you feel you really have to leave, you can. And I think even just having that space to know if I needed to, I could, that made a big difference. Because, we're a Liverpool family, right? We're not, it's not super lovey-dovey and like very sensitive, I'll say. And so when that presents itself in a family situation, they kind of really mean it. And I suppose fashion also helped me through it, right? Because that's been the love, that the thread that goes through my whole life is clothes. So I've always loved, whether it was my mum getting dressed or me getting dressed or the people or me making things. And
yeah, sometimes if you're having a tough day, just, I don't know, putting off a beautiful silk blouse by Patrick McDowell can uplift your mood. Going back to your mom, if I recall well, for your graduate collection, there was a red dress, and it was inspired by her dressing up for New Year's Eve, right? So somehow you said that there was no fashion in Liverpool, but apparently there was a fashion.
I mean, for sure there is fashion in Liverpool.
Probably in a different way.
In a different way, yeah, for sure. Maybe it's not what we see in Vogue, but it's, they have their own microclimate of style, and Liverpool style anyway is really about excess and, more is more. So it's really amazing to go out in Liverpool because you see women that have kind of spent the whole day getting ready for that evening, and they'll have they've spent ages on their outfit, their hair is done, their makeup is done, they look great, their nails are done. It's all, the highest shoes, the shortest dress or the longest dress, like it's all like about extremes. And like I said, I grew up in the suburbs, so I wasn't super close to that, but I was definitely conscious of it, especially as I got older and I started to go out in Liverpool myself. But my earliest fashion memory is of my mom at the year 2000, because they host, we lived in a very small semi-detached house, and they hosted a party for the year 2000, so the New Year's Eve party that year, and my mum wore a floor-length red crepe-backed satin dress with a train, with elbow-length velvet gloves, and satin sandals with crystals and a matching bag. And I remember, that, and she was just hosting people in that little house, and she just looked so good. And I just think, and I'm so into that even still now. I'm always an advocate of wear the thing, like wear the blouse, wear the dress, like do just wear it, because you don't always have the perfect place to wear a floor length red dress. So why not just put it on and create core memories for your kids? But
I could not agree more. And your mom is not the only person in your family that who has inspired your collection. I read that your spring summer 2026 the Lancashire Rose collection was inspired by your grandmother and was a way for you to grieve and celebrate her, right?
Yeah, for sure. I was very close to my grandma, and I learnt to sew on her sewing machine from the 1950s, and she used to sew for her kids and herself when she was younger. She was born in 1923, so she was from a very different generation to even my parents, right? And my other grandparents. She kind of occupied this almost mythical space from pre-war England, which was, growing up listening to stories of that was thrilling. Sort of like having a whole kind of movie read out to you. And I always also think that queer people seem to have quite close relationships with their grandmothers for some reason. So
I have to agree.
Yeah. it's a special relationship, right? Because it's removed from the parent, and the parent-child relationship is always very difficult, I find. But with grandparents, it's like there's this slight distance, and it becomes much easier. And she passed away in 2021, and she was 98, and she lived an amazing life, and she had 8 children and many grandchildren and great grandchildren, and lived through a war. And the road she lived on was bombed in the war. It's just one of those incredible lives where you really, I'm inspired by her story, and that practicality of making clothes. And she has there was an amazing story where she kind of would make herself a dress, and then with the offcuts she would make a mini version for her little sister. And for my mum and her sisters, she would make 6 of the same dress because it saved fabric, and it meant that my poor mum had to wear all 6 dresses because she'd get the hand-me-downs from each sister. So for about 20 years my mum was wearing the same dresses, which obviously she didn't like. But yeah, she was a huge inspiration. I was so close to her, and then it felt, for about 5-ish years after she passed away, that I felt there'd been enough time that had passed, and I could then create a body of work about her. And it was a very special collection because it was the one that came after the award, and lots of people were looking, and I'd wanted to do a collection about her. And I'd, like I said, business had been tough and we weren't able to put it together. So I actually had designed a collection before that one, which we weren't able to make, that was about her. And then once the award happened, we could revisit it, and we redesigned it, and it was much better. And that collection is very special to me.
That's so inspiring and touching, and somehow it's so wonderful to see that you can create something so beautiful, and at the same time it's so therapeutic for you as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think creativity is definitely a form of therapy, and I find it very useful to process inspiring people in my life, or just stories from family, and that's one of the beautiful parts of creative practice.
Okay, Patrick, now that you have found your place within the fashion industry and you have been recognized with the Elizabeth II award, and before I forget, recently you have some new stock. It's Harvey Nichols and Joyce in Hong Kong. So it means that your brand, is scaling up, and it's available worldwide. Where would you like to be invited next?
Now it's really about growing the business and building a strong fashion brand that can survive for the next kind of many decades to come. And it's really amazing now that we're able to kind of start putting the people and practices in place to allow that to happen. And it's been a steady burn for me, that's taken 8 years to get to this point, which by some accounts is slow, but by some accounts it's also fast, right? But there's definitely been times when I've found it very arduous, and other times when it kind of flies by. And that whole journey I'm very grateful for, because ultimately it's enabled us to get to a place where we're creating product that's very focused on a particular client in a great way. That means we can make things that make people feel great, but also that they can wear. And I think we've really found our thing now, which also feels really great.
And I also believe that being an overnight sensation or success, it's quite overrated, and it's very unlikely that it's real.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well. You get put on a pedestal that's very difficult to live up to, and
not very sustainable.
Not very sustainable, but it's also really damaging for creative voices as well. So I'm glad in a way that didn't happen with me, because it's very tempting, for sure. But then in the long run, it's not so good. Sadly, the hard work and the long way around is better in most walks of life, I think.
Well, I'm glad that you're staying true to your values.
Thank you.
And I cannot wait to see what happened next.
Me too. Yeah, stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for getting past the velvet rope with me. And also thank you for dressing me. I could get used to this.
Please do get used to it. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So whether you're on the list, crashing the gate, or building your own entrance, this is your invite to join the party.